Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions, and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last reading class, we left at page number 451. The chapter was the Hindu religion and Sri Ramakrishna. This is an article written by Swami Vivekananda. It is used by the author, Swami Sharadananda, as an introduction to this new chapter he is starting. So we shall start from page 451, where we left last time. The attainment of this Rishihood, Swami Vivekananda has already spoken to us, that Vedas are mass of spiritual knowledge attained through yoga, just as we attain to the knowledge of science through several experiments, observations, and inference from there. Similarly, the Vedic knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, is got through yoga, through the eye of yoga that they say. That means the mind purified and concentrated through yoga, so that mind can see something supersensuous, which senses cannot reveal, which any instrument of the science cannot reveal. It has to be revealed by the purified, holy, concentrated mind only through the process of yoga. So that knowledge that is revealed, it is as good as the knowledge that is revealed by the scientific instruments, because the scientific instruments can only reveal the material things. They cannot reveal anything beyond the material things. This yoga, the eye of yoga, or the concentrated, purified, holy mind through the yoga process, that reveals something supersensuous, what the senses cannot. All the five senses of man, including his mind, so cannot simply reveal certain facts. And those facts are God, soul, the eternal laws that govern the creation and evolution and involution of the cosmos. So all these laws, eternal laws, all these things cannot be revealed by any other means except through the concentrated mind of the yoga. So that knowledge has been stored, and that knowledge, mass of knowledge, is called Vedas. Veda means knowledge. This is what Swami Vivekananda has already explained. He continues the same topic. The attainment of this Rishihood, that means the seership of the immediate knowledge of the Veda, is the true realization of religion. The Rishis are those who have that concentrated, purified, holy mind through yoga. So they are called Rishis, the sages. So these sages of the Vedas, so they are like that people who have got that special instrument called the yoga. Through the yoga, they realize. So what we call intuition. They develop an intuitive faculty which is above intelligence. It does not contradict intelligence. Swami Vivekananda again and again says, intuition does not contradict the intellect. It goes beyond the intellect. What intellect cannot reveal, intuition can reveal to you. So, intellect leads to intuition, and intuition never contradicts reason. So this we can be 100% sure. So the Vedic knowledge, it doesn't contradict what we see, but it gives something more which the senses cannot perceive or inform you. So the person who has this special faculty of intuition, through which he sees the supersensual facts of spiritual world, is called the Rishi. It has been already explained. So Swamiji is referring to that. The attainment of this rishihood, the seership of the immediate knowledge of the Veda, is the true realization of religion. So what we call as a person, a knower of religion, must be having this faculty of seeing the supersensuous facts just as we see the other facts through our eyes or ears. Similarly, through the yoga, he sees the facts of God, facts of the individual souls, fact of the eternal laws of involution, evolution of the cosmos, and the eternal laws of good begetting good, bad begetting bad, good begetting happiness, bad begetting unhappiness. All these are eternal laws. He sees them, he feels them, and he speaks from direct experience that this is happening because of this law. This is happening because of this law. We contradict this law, therefore we are suffering for this. So he is called a rishi. And the real rishihood lies in having this intuitive faculty, which is higher than the intellectual faculty. Until the aspirant's life opens out to it, religion for him is a mere meaningless word, and he cannot be said to have set his foot on the threshold of religion. So this Swamiji is very clear, Sri Ram Swami Vivekananda, that real religion is, if it is to be preached, first of all we must be sure whether the preacher has attained to this intuitional level, crossing over the intellectual level, and intuitional level is reached. Just as the intellectual level is higher than the physical level. So physically we cannot see many things, but through inference, that means through intellect, we can see. Like that, through logic we can see, we can conclude many things. That is all intellectual seeing. Similarly, beyond the intellect, certain things can be seen, but intellect cannot see it. So he goes beyond the intellect. Through intuition, he brings out certain facts of spiritual life. So until the person who preaches the religion has reached this, there is no meaning in his preaching religion. He does not know anything about religion. That's what Swami Vivekananda contends about the teachers who go to preach without this intuitional faculty in them. The authority of the Veda holds good irrespective of time, place and person. That is, its authority is not confined to a particular time, country or person. Though Veda is a Sanskrit word, it does not mean the knowledge it contains belongs to only India. It belongs to the whole humanity, whole world. Just as the knowledge of science, if it has originated, some scientific knowledge would have been discovered in America, it does not belong to America, it belongs to the whole world. So just as the knowledge belongs to the whole universe, this knowledge of spirituality called the Vedas, it belongs to the whole humanity, whole world. That's what Swami again and again reiterates. The Veda alone sets forth the universal religion, because it is based on intuitive facts. Although a little of that infinite knowledge is to be found in the Itihasas, the history of spiritual life, Puranas, the mythologies, etc. of our country, and in the religious books of foreign countries also. Yet, as the first complete and unaltered collection of the entire body of the eternal knowledge, the mass of words compiled into 4 books called the Veda, well known to the Aryans, is worthy of occupying the highest place in all respects, of being adored by the whole world, and of being the ultimate proof of the truth of all scriptures, indigenous or alien. Because there is a mass of knowledge about the spiritual world which is common to the whole humanity. Wherever we are, whatever scriptures we may hold, I may hold the Bible as my scripture, another one can hold Quran as a scripture, another one as Zinda Vesta as a scripture, and another person can hold the Rig Veda as a scripture. Whatever book we may hold, but all have come from only this mass of knowledge, intuitive knowledge called the Vedas. So that is what the four Vedas, the Rig, Yajus, Sama and Atharva, it is there in the Indian people who are descendants of the Aryans. So the Aryans of Indians, they have these four Vedas. But these Vedas may belong to India, but the knowledge applies to the whole humanity. So it might have been popular in India, but its knowledge is referable by every human being anywhere and benefit from it. Regarding the mass of words called the Veda, discovered by the Aryans, it must be understood that that part alone of it, which is not Arthavada, that means eulogy, praising, some part of the Vedas. So there, somebody is praised. So some words are there, some mantras are there. So these mantras or the words, they do not have much meaning. It is always praising somebody for his good act. Say, suppose we say, may that person live for 100 years who has given us this truth. So that the thing itself has nothing much meaning except a praise of a great man. So that is not, it is not called a Veda because it does not convey anything new. Or Aitishya, tradition. Some records of the traditions are there. Some mantras have been imbibed by a hereditary line of gurus. So from such and such a guru, 24th guru, 24th person in that lineage got this mantra. So it is stated. That particular mantra in the Vedas, it does not give you anything new knowledge. So Swamiji says it's called the Aitihya or the tradition, or otherwise empirically known or knowable is the Veda. So what is very simple, which can be known directly. This is the 24th Guru, the same line, he is telling his mantra. It can be known directly. It doesn't require a Veda to tell you that this is the 24th Guru. So that we don't consider as part of the Veda. Vedas are mainly for those, or the knowledge of that, not those facts, those truths that are found out by the yogic perception, by the perception of the yoga. So those knowledge only are called particularly Veda. This mass of words is divided into two parts. What are those two parts? Namely, that relating to knowledge and that relating to work. Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda. As the rituals of the Veda and their results described in the work portion exist for all time in the domain of Maya, domain of this creation, they are subject to transformation according to the law of change with reference to time, place, person, circumstances, etc. Yes, they have been and will be changed. As social manners and customs depend on this work portion, they also do and will undergo change. Similarly, popular customs and manners too have been and will be accepted from time to time only so far as they are not contrary to the scriptures and the conduct of the wise people. One of the main causes of the downfall of the Aryans is their subjection to such popular customs and manners as are contrary to the Veda, to the conduct of the wise and to the scriptures conformable to the Veda. So the real Aryans who should be called rishis, they do not conform to any existing manners and customs which are changing and which will change. but they go directly to the source of the knowledge through their intuition, and they get you the spiritual facts. So those that simply follow some manners that are already existing and are being followed by common people, so that cannot be taken as the standard, because they will follow the manners and customs change. So the person whom such a person is following, so calling himself a rishi, it is wrong, because he is following some customs, etc., which is not his direct realization. It is not a supersensuous fact. Therefore, all those people who follow manners and customs that are already existing, so they cannot be called as rishis. And so these manners and customs also should be followed only until they are conforming to the teachings of the Vedas, teachings of the spiritual teachings of the Vedas. So that means our social laws, our economic laws, our educational laws, etc., must not go contrary to the spiritual laws. So spirituality cannot be contradicted because direct facts are there. So you cannot go against a fact, against a truth. Therefore, Vedas, they are to be followed by the smritis, by the codes of life, and also the mythology and the tradition. They should follow the injunctions or the orders of the Vedas, the spiritual laws, directly seen by the rishis. If they contradict, then their validity goes. The mythology has to give way to what the Vedas say, not the other way around. So if Vedas say one thing and the Smriti or the mythology says something else, then the tradition is Vedas prevail and the mythology has to give way. It has to adjust itself into the line dictated by the Vedas. The knowledge portion of the Veda, otherwise known as the Vedanta, aided by selfless action, concentration of mind, devotion and self-knowledge, is eternally taking place, taking people across the ocean of Maya to the other shore of liberation. As it is not at all influenced by time, place and agency, it alone is the teacher of the universal religion, a religion that is meant for all peoples, all countries and all times. So the truths of the Vedas are like the scientific laws and discoveries and inventions. So these depend upon existing unchangeable truths. They have been there for hundreds of years. They will continue to be hundreds of years because the truth does not change. The law of gravitation was there thousands of years before Isaac Newton, and it will be there continued to after Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton can come and go, but the law stands. Similarly, the knowledge of the Vedas about our spiritual life, about God, about soul, about the laws that govern the relationship between God and soul, soul and creation, creation and God, all these eternal things are in the Vedas. They are the real universal religion because they are based on perceptible truth, perceptible of course through intuition. And there is a regular method to cultivate this intuition, that is the yoga. So it is a different subject. So what Veda is called a universal religion. Why? Because it is like science. It gives you only the truth, which have been eternally existing, which will continue to exist. Therefore, anybody anywhere in the world can follow it and get the benefits of it. It is on the basis of the work portion of the Vedas that books on the social system by Manu, that is Manu Smriti, the code of life by the Manu, Rishi Manu, and others have taught, in addition to other matters, those actions that are conducive to social welfare, varying with time, place and agency. While the books like the Puranas have taken up the truths hidden in the Vedanta and have explained them in detail by way of describing the great characters of the divine incarnations and others who are embodiments of one or other of the innumerable aspects of the divinity which these books try to emphasize. So we read outside the Vedas the two things, the mythology, where the mythology speaks about incarnations of God, saints and seers who live the ideal life. That means they live the practical Vedanta. They follow the principles of Vedanta in their life. And so in their life we see a discipline which is conducive for progress in a good manner and attain to the highest knowledge ourselves. So these great ideal persons are depicted in the mythologies. And what are the ideal life they depict to us? They are the application of the principles discovered in the Vedas to human life. So these are applied by rishis like Manu. They form codes of life. If you live morally, that means if you live a selfless life, you will always get happiness. A person who is moral, who does good, he always will get happiness. He that does not goes opposite to this, he will get unhappiness because he is committing something wrong, which we call as sin. If you sin, the sin begets unhappiness. The merit begets happiness. This is the law. So the Manu says the law, and in the lives of these great people, we see that enacted. So they, all their life, they avoid sin, they go on performing meritorious acts. Not in the way we do meritorious acts. We do meritorious acts to get some happiness in this world. But these great people also follow the same rule as we do. But they don't want any happiness here. They want happiness for others. If they follow those rules, others also follow that rule. By following, others will get happiness. But what about these people who follow for the sake of others? They are happy that they are able to lead humanity to happiness. In the happiness of others, they feel happy. They are absolutely selfless. So these great people, they are depicted in the mythology, etc. So, but in course of time, the descendants of the Aryans deviated from right conduct and lacking dispassion, vairagya, devoted themselves to the prevailing popular customs and grew feeble in intellect. They failed to understand the import of even the Puranas, which appeared as contradictory to one another on account of the teaching those different divine aspects and preaching the subtle truths of the Vedanta in gross and concrete forms in detail for the consumption of weak brains. So these Aryans who were at one time, they directly went to the source of the Vedas through their yogic power. So they could get the fresh facts, so they could never be wrong. But later on, people who were the descendants of such Aryans, they did not have so much of yogic power. So they started following what others are following by sort of a tradition. So therefore they also were committing wrongs. They were also perhaps committing sins. But because they are called rishis, people started following them, the blind leading the blind. That is how the degradation of the Aryan race came. That's what the author is driving at. Hence, they split into numerous divisions the integral eternal religion, which is an aggregate of innumerable religious moods, and kindling the fire of sectarian hatred and jealousy, endeavor to throw one another into that fire. So when these people who should have been capable, who should have brought the truths from the Vedas, could not bring the Vedas truths directly, but were following the traditions that were already there. which were perhaps wrong. So they led others also into wrong ways of sectarianism, calling oneself, I am a follower of Vishnu. Vishnu is not the same God as Shiva is. And Shiva is not the same God as Kali is. Or Kali is not the same God as Mary is. So like that they went on preaching sectarian truths which was not in the Vedas. So that is how all sorts of other wrongdoings came into society. The fire sectarian hatred and jealousy endeavored to throw one another into that fire. The whole societies were divided because of this. When they thus turned Bharata, the land of religion, India in its old days were called Bharata, almost into a hell. India became a place where different sects started quarreling with one another. Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna incarnated himself in order to show what the real religion of the Aryans was and where lay the unity among the numberless sects and denominations of the Hindu religion, scattered pell-mell over a vast range of time and place. The religion that has become a source of delusion to the people of the land and an object of hatred to those of other countries, owing to its apparent division into innumerable, ever-warring sects bristling with contradictory customs. This land, which preached the truth of Vedas, which united all the different people during the prime time of the rishis. So later on, the later descendants, they could not preach the truths of the Vedas in their pristine glory, and they went on preaching the customs of the place. The customs of one place differed from the customs of the other. So the whole Hindu society was divided into hundreds of sects. Instead of one Vedic religion, the sects started multiplying. The sects of different places, they started warring with one another. So this he did. Sri Ramakrishna, he wanted to unify all of them again by telling them what the Vedas meant, so that all the sects, they belong to the one Vedas. So go deeper than the mythology, go deeper than the laws of life, advocated by the rishis like Manu. Go deeper than that, deeper at the deepest level in the Vedas, the truths of Vedas. So through yogic power, go and find out, and you see all the sects are one. So all the differences can be just, they're only superficial. The whole of humanity, whole of creation is one in God, one in the spiritual entity, which the Vedas call Brahman, the Godhead. So Sri Ramakrishna taught this by holding aloft before the gaze of all his own life as a living example of that religion eternal. Sri Ramakrishna lived his life in the light of the eternal knowledge of Vedas, because directly he perceived the Vedas. By concentrating in himself, its universality lost by the lapse of time, which all the other Aryan rishis of his time, they had lost because they lacked the power of yoga. Sri Ramakrishna, through his tremendous power of yoga, he went deep into the spiritual states and got all the truths of the Vedas, again researching the whole thing. So it had been searched earlier, but it was lost because of the lack of comprehensive power by his descendants, because they're, so to say, the dull wittiness. So they could not comprehend what the Vedas said. Sri Ramakrishna came, again delved deep through yoga into those mysteries and brought us the truths. So that is how he unified, first of all, all the different sects of Hinduism. Then again, he unites all the other world religions also. The divine, whose embodiment the Veda is, almost wholly neglected literary education in this incarnation, in order to show how the eternally existing Shastra, with the help of which Ishvara evolves, maintains and dissolves the universe, reveals itself in the heart of a rishi, wherefrom all samskaras have been erased, so that when the truth of the Shastras is thus proved, religion would be rediscovered and re-promulgated. So Sri Ramakrishna was, in a way, unlettered. He had some preliminary education of writing and reading. We can as well call him as an unlettered person. Why did he, being an incarnation of God, remain as an unlettered person to prove to the world there is nothing in books, there is nothing in the treatises or in the scriptures that are in several kinds of books. But straight away yogic power is the one thing that is required. Cultivate that one. You get all that you want in religion. You can know about God, know about the soul, know of the creation, know about the interrelations between God and the individual soul and the cosmos, the creation and God, the eternal laws of evolution and involution. All this you can get without going through any book. Book education is not required. It is the yogic education that is required. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna's life proved to us. So we shall stop here. We shall continue this wonderful topic in our next talk. Niranjanam nityamanantarupam bhaktanukampadhrita vigraham vai Ishavataram parameshamidhyam tam Ramakrishnam shirasa namamah. O Ramakrishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed a form out of compassion to the devotees, the incarnate supreme soul and the adorable Lord of all, we salute, bowing our heads before Thee.